what's wrong with the way I dress?
You want to take that?
Well, this is surprising. When I made my review on the McFarlane Year 1 Batman, I was fully expecting that to be my only review on a McFarlane DC figure. I had no reason to get them. Not only was the line going to be ending soon, but they were in a scale I don't collect, so what happened? Well, Sonic happened. More specifically, the DC x Sonic crossover that saw Jax release the Sonic cast in full DC cosplay at 5 inches tall. When those figures got released, I quickly realized that I wanted a Justice League display alongside them, so I started searching. There's at least a decent option for everyone at this point, but the character I struggled with the most was Wonderwoman. I don't care for the standard version, as I don't like the head sculpt. I certainly wasn't going to be using the movie versions, and the others were too far removed from the classic version I was looking for. For a while, I thought my best choice was the one packaged in with Godzilla, until this past July where it was announced a classic 80s version of Wonder Woman was coming out this year. Now this is what I had been looking for. So I made my pre-order, waited, it arrived, I opened it, and oh, are you kidding me? You know, if there's one thing I won't miss from Todd having the DC license, it's these fuck-ass chase variants. Just make it a separate release, Todd! Come on! Thankfully, after making some calls and doing a bit of driving, I was able to swap the chase version out with the standard one I wanted. So, with that now being sorted, let's take a look at the new Collector Edition Wonder Woman and see if she's worth the MSRP. Now, I may have said all new, but this body has been used before. Many of the previous Wonder Women I've mentioned have been on this body, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. After all, there's a reason Marvel Legends has both the Renew Your Vows and Amazing Fantasy bucks for Spider-Man, and it's simply because those bodies were made for and work well for characters like Spider-Man. And that's the case here. This body was made for Wonder Woman, and with the right colors and head sculpt, does a very good job at being a Wonder Woman based off the work of George Perez. That isn't to say this is a perfect rendition. Comparing the figure to the artwork on the back of the box, which is also on the included card, this figure's reuse results in additional sculpted detail on the torso that isn't there on Perez's artwork. Thankfully, it is rather subdued, so it isn't a big deal. The gold paint on the belt is also a bit sloppy, and while not noticeable at a distance, it's fairly easy to see up close. Also, there's some additional airbrushing on the knees for some reason. It's not done anywhere else, and bending the knee makes it even more apparent. Just an odd choice. Then there's the issue I typically see people have with McFarlane figures, the gigantic thighs. At this point, this is something I chalk up to a stylistic choice, but if you haven't liked it previously, you aren't going to like it here. Personally though, I have more criticism towards the decision not to have a cut at the upper torso for articulation's sake. We're going to get more into it later, but I don't understand why you would purposely limit the articulation like this. Same with the additional sculpting at the top of the thighs. You don't need this much sculpting on something that's mostly covered all the time, and all this does is limit the thigh rotation. Thankfully, I have no complaints about the head sculpt. This is great. Interestingly, at first I thought the hair was molded in black with blue paint added to highlight it, but no, the hair is actually molded in a dark blue and it works rather well. So overall, Diana is a very nice looking figure. There are a few paint oddities, and the sculpt choices not only cause some articulation issues, but also proportionately may turn people off. But for those already into McFarlane's action figures, I don't think anything here will bother you much, at least as far as looks are concerned. Again, we'll get to articulation in a second. First though, let's take a look at the accessories, and we've got a pretty nice selection. Along with the already attached fists, we've got gripping hands and also splayed out hands, which after the last McFarlane figure I covered had no extra hands, this is a much appreciated sight. But grip hands obviously need something to hold, so we have a sword and battle axe, which are honestly a bit difficult to get into them. The grip hands aren't as flexible of a plastic as I'd hoped, so I'd recommend heating them up a little. That should make putting the weapons into the hands much easier. As for the weapons themselves, they're fairly good. I prefer the sword over the axe, if only because I find the details on the axe to be too muddied and undefined. They're also a softer plastic, so be a bit careful to not warp them. If you're not a fan of giving Wonder Woman weapons though, then you can instead go with the shield. Again, like the axe, I'm not a fan of the muddy details, but the gold logo does sort of make up for it, and it slides onto the arm smoothly for easy use. But of course, what would a Wonder Woman be without her signature gear, the Lasso of Truth? It's a string. It's a very nice looking string, but it's a string. I really don't know what else I can say here. With a bit of creativity, I'm sure you can get some fun poses with it, but if you don't want to use it, there is thankfully a dedicated spot to wrap it around as storage. And speaking of poses, if you spent any time with this body mold, or really any McFarlane figure previously, then you'll pretty much know what parts of articulation are great and what parts are lacking. We've got double jointed elbows and knees, some tight bicep swivels, as well as the same great wrist joints used by the likes of Mafex, Mattel, and Blockies. The ankle joints are a bit weird, you can't really pivot the same way as other figures, but once you understand it, it'll work just fine. But then you have the extremely lacking thigh rotation, the torso having no real crunch or diaphragm joint, the shoulder cap system giving no butterfly movement, and perhaps the worst thing for this figure, the head movement. This figure really needed a ball joint at the base of the neck, because without it, Diana struggles to look around thanks to her hair. And even when she can turn her head, the hair often causes the head to dip downwards so she can't look up. The overall posing is alright. You'll be able to get some decent poses just fine. But the moment you try to do anything super dynamic, you'll start to run into problems. Something that becomes especially noticeable when compared to other figures at the same price point. Coming in around 18.5 centimeters to the top of her hair, Wonder Woman is naturally meant to be in the 7-inch scale. I initially thought that you could maybe fudge her into a 6-inch display, sort of going for a Darwin Cook-esque height, but even when put next to Marvel Legends, she's too tall, and that gets even worse when looking at true 1/12 scale stuff like Figuarts. She should work fine with other McFarlane figures, but that's not why I got her. I got her to see if she would work with my DCX Sonic figures, and when comparing her next to them, I think it turns out quite well. Obviously, there's a difference between her colors and Amy's, but Sonic, Knuckles, and Shadow have completely different outfits to Flash, Superman, and Batman in the comics, so who really cares? I bought Wonder Woman specifically to fit in with my DC Sonic stuff, and I think she does that just fine. But she's also good as a McFarlane Wonder Woman as well. It hits all the details needed to be a more classic version of the character, alongside having a nice amount of accessories to boot. If the articulation was better thought out, and maybe an additional face was added, this would be a recommend for everyone. As it stands, it's definitely worth it for those already invested in McFarlane's DC Multiverse stuff, but if you're not, you're better off waiting to see what Mattel does. But with all that being said, we're at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Later!